This is eternal human spirit, where every story proves why humanity never breaks.
The Panic in the Palace. The palace of the alien queen was not like any other palace. It was made of black stone that shimmered with strange blue light. The walls seemed alive, humming with the power of the empire. Inside those halls, fear was more common than laughter. Servants whispered in shadows. Guards marched with silent steps, and no one dared to meet the queen's eyes. On that day, silence turned into chaos. The twin daughters of the queen, the only heirs to her throne, had vanished without a trace. No guard saw them leave, no alarm was raised, and no door had been forced. Yet the princesses were gone. The palace shook with confusion and dread. The queen's scream of fury echoed through every chamber. The alien queen was not only a ruler, she was a storm in living form. Her presence filled the air like fire. Her voice could make soldiers tremble. Her wrath could crush entire cities. When she entered the throne hall, her cloak dragged across the shining floor. Her eyes burned like stars. She demanded answers, but none came. "Find them," she ordered, her voice shaking the stone pillars. "Find my daughters, or I will tear this world apart." Her guards fell to their knees, vowing to search every corner of the empire. Yet fear ran deeper than loyalty because everyone knew one truth. The queen's rage was as deadly to her allies as to her enemies. In the palace, whispers began. Some said assassins from rival empires had taken the girls. Some said traitors. Inside, the court had planned a coup. But others, braver or perhaps more foolish, spoke of humans, the fragile species brought into service after wars, creatures the aliens mocked as weak, small, and unworthy of power. Yet there was a whisper. What if a human had stolen the heirs? The queen heard the whispers, and each one made her anger rise. She refused to believe her children could be touched by such beings. Yet a seed of fear began to grow in her heart. It was a fear she never admitted to anyone. For the alien queen was never meant to feel fear, only rage and control. The search began at once. Squads of armored soldiers marched into every chamber, the kitchens, the gardens, the high towers, the hidden tunnels. They tore apart furniture, broke open sealed doors, and questioned servants with sharp blades hovering near their throats. Still no trace was found. The princesses had vanished as if swallowed by the very walls. Hours passed, but the queen did not rest. Her heart pounded with every passing moment. She stood in her private chamber, staring at the empty beds of her daughters, the small blankets still warm, their favorite crystal toys lying abandoned on the floor. The sight shook her more than a battlefield ever had. She clenched her hands until her claws cut into her skin. The pain was real, but it could not silence the fear that screamed inside her as the sun of the alien world dipped low, painting the black palace with red light. A captain of the guard returned, his face pale, his armor dented from running through narrow passages. He knelt before the queen, his voice trembling as he spoke. "My queen, we have found traces, small footprints, leading away from the royal chambers, leading out of the palace gates." The queen's eyes narrowed. Her voice dropped into a dangerous whisper. "Where do they lead?" she asked. The guard swallowed hard. "They lead to the lower quarters, my queen, the place where the human workers are kept." The hall fell silent. Even the humming walls seemed to freeze. The alien queen's fury blazed brighter than ever. Her daughters, the heirs of her empire, the blood of her blood, had somehow ended up near the quarters of humans. It was an insult beyond measure, a threat she could not allow. Her soldiers trembled, knowing that the storm had only begun. The queen rose from her throne, her steps slow but heavy, each one like thunder, her eyes fixed on the path ahead. "If a human has touched them," she said, her voice like ice, "then no human in this world will live by dawn." Her words spread through the palace like fire. Servants wept in corners, guards tightened their grips on weapons, and the empire itself seemed to hold its breath. Far below, in the quiet shadows of the lower quarters, A single light flickered in a small room, and from that room came the sound of soft humming, a sound that did not belong to fear or rage, but to something far gentler, far older, something the queen had forgotten long ago, and in that moment, though she did not yet know it, the fate of her daughters, her throne, and perhaps her entire empire rested not in the hands of warriors or kings, but in the arms of a human. The hunt for the missing heirs. The alien queen's order spread across the palace like fire through dry grass. The soldiers of her empire rushed into action, their heavy boots striking against the black stone floors, their eyes glowing with the fury of their queen and their weapons ready to cut down anyone who resisted. No corridor was left unsearched, no chamber was left unopened, and no servant was left unshaken. For the fear of the queen's wrath was greater than death itself. Through the long halls the sound of marching echoed. The guards carried strange scanning crystals that lit up the shadows, searching for even the faintest sign of the princesses. Each soldier knew that failure meant destruction. Because their queen was not like rulers of other worlds who forgave mistakes, she was a storm of rage, a being who would rather see her empire burn than admit weakness. And yet beneath all of that fury there was something new trembling inside. It was fear. Her daughters had never been out of her sight for so long. They were mischievous, but always under watch, and now the thought of them wandering alone in the cold corners of her empire made her heart twist. She stood at the balcony of her throne hall, watching from above as her soldiers stormed into every corner, her claws tapping against the stone rail, her breathing heavy, her eyes searching every shadow as if she could tear the walls apart with her gaze alone. The guards broke into kitchens where terrified cooks dropped their trays and plates. They stormed the gardens where alien plants hissed and twisted at their presence. They searched the training grounds, the slave quarters, and even the sacred halls of the priests, but no trace of the princesses was found. Everywhere they went, only silence and fear answered them. And still the queen's patience grew thinner with each passing moment. Finally, a squad captain approached her, bowing deeply, his voice shaking as he delivered his report. "My queen, there are no signs within the palace walls, but outside the eastern gates we have found a trail, 2 sets of small prints, moving together, but not alone. We also found heavier prints. The shape does not match our soldiers. It is the footprint of a human." The hall gasped, and the queen's eyes narrowed, her fury boiling like molten fire. She could not believe that her royal daughters, the blood of her line, had stepped beyond the gates with a human. She remembered the humans her empire had captured after wars, weak and fragile creatures with short lives and trembling hands, unfit for battle, unfit for ruling, and certainly unfit for touching her heirs. Yet the trail did not lie. The prints were clear, fresh, and undeniable. "Bring me this human," the queen hissed, her voice echoing like thunder. "Drag him before me, and let the stones of this palace drink his blood if he is guilty." Her soldiers roared in obedience and stormed out through the palace gates. Following the trail of prints that cut through the dust of the outer courtyard, the hunt had begun. Outside the palace, the empire stretched wide. Towering black towers rose into the sky. Glowing ships moved between them, and crowds of workers bowed as the soldiers thundered past. None dared to ask questions, for they knew that silence was the only shield. When the queen was angry, the soldiers searched every corner of the lower levels, opening small chambers, scattering merchants from the marketplaces, frightening children who hid behind the cloaks of their mothers, and breaking open doors that stood in their way. The sound of the hunt shook the entire city, but it was not only soldiers who searched. The queen herself stepped down from her throne, her cloak flowing behind her like a shadow of war. Her eyes burned brighter than the palace flames, and her claws scraped against the stone as she walked. She did not trust her captains alone. She would see the truth with her own eyes. She would follow the trail herself, because nothing in this world was more precious to her than her daughters, not the empire, not her crown, not even her own life. The trail of footprints led deeper into the worker districts, where the air smelled of smoke and oil, and the houses were small and broken compared to the shining halls of the palace. Here the humans lived, carrying out tasks for their alien masters, often beaten, often silenced, yet somehow enduring. The queen despised walking these streets, for she believed them unworthy of her presence, but tonight her pride mattered little, for each step her daughters had taken pulled her deeper into the world she had long ignored. The guards followed every mark carefully, their scanners glowing, their eyes sharp, until finally they stopped before a simple wooden door. Unlike the palace doors of stone and crystal, this one was fragile, barely standing. Light flickered faintly. Through the cracks and from inside came a sound that froze the queen where she stood. It was not crying, not screaming, not even laughter. It was a sound that her alien ears had heard only in rare moments. It was a low, gentle humming, like a lullaby. The queen raised her claw, signaling silence. Her soldiers stopped breathing. The entire street went still. The humming continued from within, and the queen's heart, fierce and hard as iron, pounded in confusion. She wanted to break the door, to storm inside, but something held her back for a moment, something she could not name, a strange weakness in her chest. But the moment passed, her rage returned, and her voice broke the silence like fire breaking glass. "Open it," she commanded, and with a single strike, her soldiers shattered the fragile door into splinters. The queen stepped inside, her eyes blazing, ready to face whoever had dared to touch her daughters, ready to unleash her fury. Yet what she saw inside did not match her rage. It was something else, something that made her steps falter, something that even the fiercest alien queen was not prepared for. The human's involvement. When the queen entered the small chamber, the air shifted. It was not filled with the scent of polished stone or burning incense as in her throne hall. Instead, it carried the warmth of cooked bread, the faint smell of oil from the human lamps, and the soft hum of something that did not belong to her world. Her soldiers moved quickly, spreading across the room with their weapons ready. But then, their eyes widened, their claws lowered, and even the captain froze in disbelief. For lying upon a rough wooden bed was the sight that none could have imagined. The two princesses of the alien empire, daughters of the most feared ruler across. The stars, curled peacefully upon the chest of a human, the queen's breath caught in her throat. For a moment her rage was replaced by silence. Her daughters, who had caused her heart to thunder with panic, now rested in calmness against the weak frame of a being she had despised. Their small alien bodies glowed faintly under the dim light. Their small hands clenched the human's tunic as if he were the only shield in the universe, and their delicate faces were not twisted in fear or pain, but softened into sleep, their eyelids closed, their breathing steady, and their foreheads resting against the rise and fall of his chest. The human was not armored like her guards, nor tall like her warriors. He was plain, his body scarred from labor, his skin pale under the shadow of the palace torches. Yet his eyes, half open from drowsiness, carried no fear. Instead, he looked at the queen with calmness that was strange, unnatural even, for no human had ever looked upon her without trembling. He did not bow, he did not beg. He only placed one hand gently over the small backs of the princesses, holding them as if they were his own children. The queen's fury burned back into her veins. Her voice shattered the silence. "What sorcery is this?" she roared, her claws scraping the wall. "What trick have you played upon my blood?" Her soldiers snapped back to attention, their weapons raised, their armor rattling as they surrounded the human. Yet he did not flinch. He only turned his head toward the queen and spoke, his voice low but steady. "There is no trick. Your daughters were afraid. They cried. They searched for comfort. And I did the only thing I knew. I gave them my chest to rest upon, and my voice to calm their fear." The queen's mind rejected his words. She could not believe that her royal heirs, the future of her throne, had chosen a human of all creatures. She stepped forward, her shadow covering the entire room. Her eyes blazed with the fire of 1,000 suns. "Lies!" she spat. "You lured them here. You dared to touch what belongs to me. You dared to defile the blood of my line, and for this you will die." Her hand rose, energy crackling between. Her claws, the soldiers prepared to strike. The air itself seemed to split with the force of her wrath. But then one of the princesses stirred, her small hand reaching upward, not toward her mother, not toward the guards, but toward the human. She whispered in her alien tongue a word that meant safe, and then buried her face deeper into his chest, clinging tighter. The second daughter followed, her small fingers gripping. The human's shirt, murmuring softly as if the queen's voice was nothing more than distant thunder. The room fell silent again. The queen's strike frozen in midair, her soldiers looking at one another in disbelief, for never before had the royal heirs shown such trust to anyone outside their blood. The human's voice broke the silence again. "You call me weak, you call my kind fragile, but fear does not care for strength. Comfort does not rise from claws. Your daughters wanted only a heartbeat, and mine was near." His words were simple, without arrogance, without fear, only truth. But the truth was sharper than any blade, and it cut into the queen's pride deeper than any wound could. Her rage screamed for release. Her pride demanded blood, but her heart trembled. Her daughters were safe, untouched by harm, their peace undeniable, and the one holding them did not look like an enemy. He looked like a guardian, an unlikely protector born not from power, but from something else, something the queen had almost forgotten existed. Her soldiers shifted nervously, waiting for her command. The human remained still. The daughters refused to leave his chest. The queen's claws lowered slowly, though her eyes burned with storm. She wanted to deny it. She wanted to tear the human apart. But even she, the fiercest ruler of her empire, could not ignore the truth her daughters had chosen. The queen's voice came again, but softer, edged with confusion rather than rage. "Why?" she demanded, her tone less like a ruler and more like a mother. "Why do they cling to you? What spell binds them?" The human answered without hesitation, his hand still resting gently upon the small forms of the princesses. "There is no spell, only warmth, only a chest that beats, only a voice that hums, and sometimes it is enough to chase away the dark." The queen felt a shiver run through her, a feeling she had not known for centuries, doubt, and with it something even stranger, respect. But she crushed it quickly inside, unwilling to admit weakness before her guards. She turned her head, her cloak sweeping behind her. "Take him," she commanded, though her voice lacked its usual fire. "Take him to the palace cells until I decide his fate." Her soldiers moved forward, but still with hesitation, for the daughters clung tighter, refusing to let him go, their tiny voices protesting softly, and their mother, the great Queen of the Stars, realized that even if she ordered his death, her daughter's cries might haunt her forever. And so, the chamber remained in tension, the queen torn between her rage, her pride, and the undeniable sight before her, a human, fragile and plain, yet holding in his arms the two most precious lives in the empire, the queen's rage and suspicion. The throne. Hall had never felt so heavy with silence as the queen returned with her daughters in her arms. Behind her marched the guards, dragging the human in chains. Though his face remained calm, the sight of the twins clinging to him had unsettled even the most loyal soldiers, and now whispers spread like smoke through the court. The nobles looked upon the human with disgust and fear, while servants dared not breathe too loudly, for all awaited the storm that was sure to break. The queen placed her daughters back in their golden cradles, but even there their small eyes followed the human, their tiny hands reaching as if they wanted to return to his chest, and that sight tore through the queen's pride like a blade. Through cloth, she rose to her full height, her cloak sweeping across the marble floor, her voice cutting through the silence. "Explain to me how my blood, my heirs, the daughters of the throne, were found in your arms." Her tone was filled with venom, yet beneath it lurked something else, something she had not felt since her own youth. Confusion. The human stood before her, his chains rattling as he raised his head. His eyes did not show fear, though he knew death waited at a single command. "I explained already, Queen. They were crying. They were afraid. I gave them comfort, nothing more," he said, his voice steady, his words simple. The court erupted in outrage. Alien nobles shouted, their voices sharp, accusing him of sorcery, of trickery, of plotting against the throne. Priests hissed prayers, guards raised their weapons. The queen lifted her hand and silence fell once again, yet inside her mind a storm raged. She wanted to believe he had used tricks, that he had poisoned her daughters' minds with hidden power that would explain why her heirs had chosen him instead of their own kind. But when she looked upon him, she saw no cunning, no weapon, no spell. She only saw scars from labor, a chest that beat steadily, and eyes that carried a strange strength she could not name. Still, her pride screamed, her anger demanded answers. "You speak of comfort as if comfort is a weapon. Do you claim my daughters need what only you can give?" she hissed, her claws scraping the arm of her throne, sparks flying from the sharp edges. The human did not lower his gaze. "I claim nothing. I only gave what I could. If another had been there, they might have done the same. But it was me, and I would not turn away from children who wept." His answer was soft, yet unshakable. Like stone beneath water, the queen's rage grew, not only at his words but at the truth within them. She could not deny the memory of her daughters' peaceful faces, their whispers of safety, their refusal to release him even when her soldiers dragged him in chains. She tried to silence the memory, but it echoed louder with every breath. She turned her fury upon her court, her voice rising like thunder. "Search him, search his chamber, search every human dwelling in this city. If there is a hidden plot, I will tear it from the roots." Her soldiers bowed, racing to obey, their armor clattering as they rushed from the hall. But the queen remained, her eyes fixed upon the human. Her daughters whimpered in their cradle, their small voices echoing across the hall. They reached again with their hands, their eyes shimmering with tears, and once more they called softly, in their alien tongue, the word for safe, the word they had whispered before, and this time the court went silent in awe, for no one had ever heard the princess's call to anyone but their mother. The queen felt her chest tighten. The sound of that word spoken for a human was like poison, and yet also like truth. Suspicion clouded her mind. Could it be that her daughters sensed something she could not? Could it be that this human carried a strength hidden beneath his fragile form? She wanted to dismiss it, but deep inside a whisper grew louder, the whisper of fear, the whisper of doubt, and it shook her more than any war she had fought. She leaned forward on her throne, her voice sharp as a blade. "If I find even a trace of sorcery, you will die slowly, human, and your kind will be wiped from this city." The man did not tremble. He only bowed his head slightly. "If you find sorcery, then do as you must, but you will not, for there is none." The queen's eyes burned with fury. She wanted to strike him down, to silence him forever. But her daughter's cries rose once again, soft and desperate, calling out for him. Her heart shook, and though she forced her claws to remain still, she knew she had reached a crossroads. Her empire demanded pride. Her daughters demanded truth. And between the two she stood torn. That night the queen could not sleep. She stood by the cradle of her heirs, watching as they tossed and turned, their small hands searching, even in dreams, for the warmth of the human they had clung to. Her pride screamed to forbid it, yet her heart ached at their unease. And so she paced the hall, her mind burning, her suspicion growing, torn between the storm of her rage and the whisper of something she had long buried, the clash of pride and truth. The queen summoned her council at dawn. The throne hall was filled with high lords, commanders, priests, and scribes. each one speaking with sharp tongues and trembling fear. They argued over the human, some demanding his execution to preserve honor, others whispering of caution. Yet none dared to speak too loudly in front of their queen, for her eyes blazed like molten fire and her claws drummed against the throne as she listened, her mind torn between pride and the undeniable memory of her daughter's trust. The human stood chained at the center of the hall, guarded by soldiers with blades pressed close, but his posture was not broken. His shoulders were straight, his eyes steady. He did not look like a man awaiting death. Instead, he looked like one who had already accepted it if it came, and that strange calm unsettled the court more than defiance would have when the nobles spat insults and accused him of witchcraft. He did not answer when priests cursed him with words of ancient power. He did not bow. He only looked at the queen as if no one else existed, as if the truth he carried was only meant for her. The queen rose at last, her cloak sweeping the floor. The voices fell silent. Her daughters stirred in their cradles at the sound of her steps, and once again their small hands reached out toward the human. This simple act silenced the entire court, and the queen felt the weight of it pressing against her pride. She turned toward him, her voice sharp and filled with fire. "You stand, accused of sorcery, of trickery, of poisoning the minds of my daughters, yet they cling to you as if you were their protector. Tell me, human, why should I not tear you apart where you stand?" The human raised his head slowly, his chains clinking in the quiet, his voice calm though every eye and every blade was against him. "Because killing me will not change what already happened. Your daughters found peace with me, not because of spells, not because of power, but because sometimes weakness can give what strength cannot. They did not need a throne or a crown. They needed a chest that beats, arms that hold, and a voice that calms the dark." The hall erupted in outrage. Nobles shouted for his death. Priests demanded fire. Commanders roared that his words were lies meant to weaken the empire. Yet the queen heard only the echo of his truth, and it cut through the storm of voices like lightning through a cloud. Her claws clenched against her throne. Her pride screamed within her heart, for never in her reign had a human dared to speak so openly. Yet she could not deny the evidence of her own eyes. Her daughters had chosen him, not once, not twice, but again and again. Her rage rose, and she struck the floor with her claw. The stone cracked beneath her strength. Silence fell at once. Her voice thundered across the chamber. "Do you claim that you, a human, know more of my daughters than I? Their mother, their queen, their blood?" Her eyes burned, her voice shook the pillars. Her pride demanded his submission, demanded his fear, but he did not yield. He met her gaze, steady and unflinching. "No, queen, I claim nothing above you, but I gave them what they needed when no one else did, and they chose me, not by my will, but by their own." The queen's heart pounded. Her fury told her to strike him down, to crush him before all, to prove that no human could defy her. Yet deep inside another voice whispered, a voice she had buried long ago, the voice of a mother, the voice that remembered her daughter's first cries, their small hands gripping her finger, the nights when they trembled in sleep and she had sung to them softly. She remembered, and for the first time she realized that the human's words echoed something she herself had forgotten. The court waited for her command. Soldiers stood ready to kill. Priests raised their staffs. Nobles leaned forward with hungry eyes, but she did not speak at once. She turned her gaze to her daughters, their small forms restless, their eyes bright. With unshed tears, they reached again, whispering the word for safe, their voices trembling but filled with truth, and the queen felt her pride clash with a truth she could not silence. Finally she spoke, her tone low but heavy. "You speak boldly, human, and your words cut like blades. But pride is the crown of a queen, and pride cannot bend to a slave." She paused, her voice rising again. "Yet truth cannot be silenced either, and though I despise it, I cannot deny that my daughters found peace in your arms." The hall gasped, the nobles hissed, the priests glared, but none dared to challenge her, for her voice was law. She pointed one claw toward him, her eyes burning with both fury and doubt. "You will not be killed today, but you will not be free. You will remain in chains until I decide your fate, and if you have spoken lies, if I find even a shadow of deception, you will wish for death, long before it comes." Her words struck the hall like a storm, and the guards pulled him back. Yet the daughters cried out, their small voices echoing, their hands stretching toward him until they shook in their cradle. The queen turned away, her cloak swirling, her claws trembling though no one could see. Her pride remained intact before the court, but within her heart a crack had formed, and through that crack the truth of the human's words had slipped, a truth she feared more than any enemy. For if humans carried a strength beyond power, then the empire itself might not stand unshaken. The palace fell into uneasy silence after the queen's decree. The human was locked away in the lower cells, his wrists bound by chains of black steel that glowed faintly with energy. Guards stood at every corner, their eyes sharp, their orders strict. Yet even as they watched him, they could not erase the image burned into their minds. The royal princesses, clinging to his chest, whispering the word safe as if his heart alone could shield them. Whispers spread through the court and the city, some mocking the human as a trickster, others whispering in fear that perhaps there was more to his kind than weakness, and still others wondering if this event was the beginning of something that could not be stopped. The alien queen walked her halls with restless steps, her cloak dragging across the black stone, her eyes glowing with both fire and doubt. She had commanded empires, destroyed armies, bent entire worlds to her will. Yet she could not bend the truth of her daughter's cries. Even now, in the golden cradle, they whimpered, their sleep broken, their small hands clutching at the air, calling softly for the one she had chained. Every time she reached to hold them, they pushed against her chest, not in rejection, but in yearning, their voices whispering the same word again and again. Safe, safe, safe. And the queen felt a pain sharper than any blade, for in their innocent voices her pride was defeated. She summoned her priests and demanded rituals. They burned incense. They sang chants of ancient power. They poured sacred oils upon the cradle. But the children did not calm. She ordered her healers to bring potions of sleep. They tried, yet the daughters turned away, their small eyes wet with tears, their cries echoing through the palace until the walls themselves seemed to tremble. The queen's fury rose, yet beneath it lay something heavier. Despair. She had faced battles without fear, but the helpless cries of her daughters shook her heart in ways no enemy ever had. In the dead of night, unable to bear the sound of their tears, she ordered the human to be brought from the cells. The guards hesitated, for they feared her wrath if this act shamed her further, but her command was law. And soon the man stood once again in the throne hall, his chains still bound, his clothes dirtied from the cell, yet his eyes steady as before. When the daughters saw him, their cries ended in an instant. They reached for him with desperate hands, their voices softening into whimpers. And when he was placed near the cradle, they clung to him at once, curling against his chest as they had before, their breathing steadying, their tears drying, their small bodies at peace. The hall was silent. Even the guards held their breath. The queen stood motionless, her claws pressed into her palms. Her pride screamed at her to strike, to deny what she saw, to call it sorcery. But her heart betrayed her. Her daughters were calm. Their tiny voices murmured the word safe, and she could not deny that no ritual, no prayer, no potion had given them this peace, only the human, only his warmth, only his heartbeat. The queen's voice came low, shaking not with weakness but with something rare, uncertainty. "What power is this, human? What trick hides in your blood?" she demanded, her eyes blazing, yet her tone not as sharp as before. The man lowered his gaze to the daughters sleeping against him and whispered, "There is no trick, Queen. There is only loyalty. Children know who they can trust. They know who will harm and who will protect. Your daughters do not fear me, because I gave them no reason to, and so they chose me, not with thought, not with command, but with trust." The queen shivered. Not from cold, but from the weight of his words. Her empire had been built on fear, loyalty enforced by blade and fire, trust demanded by power, never given freely. But now she saw the opposite. Two royal heirs clinging to a man who had no crown, no blade, no power. Only arms that held them gently and a heart that beat without lies. And in that truth the queen felt her empire tremble. The nobles who had gathered in the shadows of the hall whispered among themselves. Some said it was weakness. Others said it was dangerous, but a few dared to whisper a thought they had never spoken before. If humans could earn loyalty without force, what might happen if that truth spread? What might happen if soldiers, servants, or even subjects learned to follow without fear but with trust? The thought shook them, for it was a truth that could topple thrones. The queen dismissed them with a roar, unwilling to let their whispers grow, but she could not silence the whisper. In her own heart, as she watched the man cradling her daughters, she remembered a time long ago before she was queen, when her own mother had sung to her in the dark, when comfort had come not from power, but from arms that shielded her. And she realized that somewhere in the fire of her reign she had forgotten that truth. That night she ordered the human to remain not in the cells but in chambers close to the cradle. Her voice harsh, so none would call her weak. He will remain under guard, bound, watched but near, until the heirs no longer cry for him. She declared. Her soldiers bowed, hiding their unease. But the queen's words could not erase what all had seen. The daughter's loyalty had been given, freely and fully, to the human. In the quiet hours, as the palace drifted into uneasy sleep, the queen sat alone in the shadows of her throne, her eyes fixed upon the chamber where her daughters rested. Against the man she called fragile, and she whispered to herself words she would never admit aloud, words heavy with fear. What if loyalty cannot be commanded? What if it can only be given? And the thought echoed through her mind like thunder across endless skies. The shaken throne. The days that followed were unlike any the empire had ever known. The palace, once filled with the sound of orders, the clash of soldiers, and the whispers of fearful servants, now carried a different sound. The soft laughter of the princesses as they played near the human, the gentle hum of his voice as he sang to them, the steady rhythm of their breathing as they fell asleep upon his chest, and though the queen ordered him to remain under guard, though chains still bound his wrists, everyone could see that in the eyes of the princesses he was no prisoner. He was their shield, their comfort, their chosen protector. The nobles fumed in secret chambers, their voices sharp with anger and fear. They could not accept what their eyes had seen, that the daughters of their queen, heirs to the throne, clung to a human more tightly than to their own kind. Some demanded the man's death, others plotted, quietly, believing that if he were removed, the queen's pride would heal. Yet even as they schemed, none dared move without her command, for they had seen her hesitation, and they knew the fire of her wrath still burned. But alongside it grew something none had ever expected. Doubt. The queen herself was torn in two. Her pride ached to crush the human, to erase the shame of her daughter's choice, to remind the court and the galaxy that humans were nothing, that they were dust beneath her feet. Yet each time she tried to harden her resolve, her daughter's cries shattered it. Each time she ordered him to be kept apart, their tears returned. Their voices rose in that single word, safe, and each time she brought him near, peace fell upon them like a warm cloak. She could not deny what her heart saw, even if her pride refused to accept it. One evening she entered the chamber quietly, unseen by guards, and watched. The human sat upon the floor with her daughters curled against him, their small heads resting on his shoulders, his chains heavy but his arms steady. He told them a story in a low voice, simple words of his home, of skies filled with stars seen from a world far smaller than hers, of rivers where children played, of fires where families gathered, and though the queen could not understand why such plain words held her daughters so still, she felt something stir within her, something long buried beneath years of war and rule. She felt the memory of her own mother's voice, long lost to time, and the sharp edges of her pride weakened. She returned to her throne hall the next day and summoned her council. Their voices rose again with demands for the human's death, for the preservation of pride, for the protection of their empire's image. But when the queen lifted her hand, the hall fell silent. Her eyes glowed not only with fire but with something heavier. Truth. "My throne stands on fear," she declared, her voice echoing across the pillars. "Fear has kept armies in line. Fear has bent worlds to their knees. But my daughters, the blood of my blood, do not cling to fear. They cling to trust, and that trust was not given to me, nor to you, but to him." She pointed toward the chamber where the human remained, and her words shook the court like thunder. Gasps filled the hall, priests muttered curses, nobles stared in disbelief, but none dared speak, for her voice was law. Yet in their silence there was a tremor, for they knew what her words meant. If trust could rival fear, if loyalty could be given freely rather than commanded, then the foundation of their empire itself was fragile. The throne trembled though it did not fall. The queen dismissed the council with a wave of her hand, her claws digging into the arm of her throne, her heart heavy with the weight of what she had spoken. She had not freed the human. She had not named him protector. Yet her words had opened a door that could never be closed, for even she could no longer deny that a single fragile human had shaken the heart of an empire with nothing but warmth. That night she walked alone through the palace, the stars beyond the towers burning bright. Her daughters slept peacefully for the first time, in days, curled once again against the chest of the human, and the queen stood in the doorway, her pride wounded, her mind torn. But her heart unwilling to shatter the peace she saw before her, she whispered to herself words no one else could hear. "Perhaps strength is not only in the blade, perhaps spirit is the weapon I never understood." And so the throne of the fiercest alien queen stood tall, yet beneath it a crack had formed, a crack made not by armies or betrayal, but by the heartbeat of a human, and in that crack the future waited, a future where pride and fear might one day fall before the quiet strength of trust, a future where humans might rise not by conquest but by spirit, and though the queen did not admit it, though she swore to herself she never would, she knew the truth had already begun reshaping her empire.
Thank you for joining Eternal Human Spirit, where humanity always rises again.